Go ahead and dismiss that and go downstairs here. Proverbs 31. That'll probably turn me up just a smidgen, if you will, Justin. Just turn it up just a little bit, if you will, just a fraction. Not very far. If I need to, I can just use my, yeah, that's good right there. If I need to, I'll just use my preaching voice. Proverbs 31 is, you may know the Bible well. You probably know where I'm going with this passage here. You know that Proverbs was written very much by Solomon, but kind of changes gears, as we'll see here in a minute, in chapter number 31 with a different writer. But, you know, I heard of some myths of motherhood that are out there, and some of you women that are mothers can even debunk these even more. One myth, somebody said that a child is carried in her mother's womb for only 9 months. Somebody doesn't know that a child is carried in his mother's heart for a lifetime.
Right.
Somebody said it takes 6 weeks to get back to normal after you've had a baby. Somebody doesn't know that once you're a mother, normal is history. Right? Somebody said you learn how to be a mother by instinct. Somebody never took a 3-year-old shopping. I can speak to that, having one. Somebody said being a mother is boring. And some of our teenagers can relate to this. Somebody never rode in a car driven by a teenager with a driver's permit. Right, Brother Mike? Somebody said good mothers should never raise their voices ever. Somebody never came out the back door just in time to see her child hit a golf ball through the neighbor's kitchen window. Right? Somebody said you don't need an education. You don't need an education to be a mother. Somebody never helped a 4th grader with his math, right?
Right.
I hear some amens on that. Let's wait here. Somebody said you can't love the 5th child as much as you love the 1st. Somebody doesn't have 5 children, right? Somebody said a mother can find all the answers to her child rearing in some of these books. Somebody never had a child stuff beans up their nose, right? They don't write that in books on what to do. Somebody said the hardest part of being a mother is labor and delivery. Somebody never watched her baby get on the bus for the first day of kindergarten. Somebody said a mother can stop worrying after a child gets married. Somebody doesn't know that marriage adds then a new son-in-law or a daughter-in-law to a mother's heartstrings. You never stop being a mother, do you? Somebody said a mother's job is done when her first child leaves home. Somebody never had a grandchild. Somebody said your mother knows you love her, so you don't even need to tell her. But somebody isn't a mother. You say, tell your mother you love her. You know, as I've had the blessing to pastor this church for almost 3 years, it'll be 3 years in September, I've found that Mother's Day services are very different for individuals. Number one, it's very special, and I count it a privilege to be able to preach here on Mother's Day. It's a great day in which we get to honor women and mothers and show our appreciation, but I found it can be a mixed bag as well. So we're all going through different things here. Some of you may have some similarities on how you deal with this day, if you will, if you want to put it that way. Some of you may have the privilege, like me, to have been raised in a good home with a godly mother to teach you right and wrong, to make sure you were in church. And if we were sick, we had to have a doctor's note not to go to church. And I thank God for that. And you might, maybe like me, still have a living mother that you can call up and say, I love you, Mom. Thank you for being my mother. Some of you, though, you may have had it a little more difficult on days like this. Some of you might have had a godly mother that loved you, brought you up in church, and brought you up in the right ways, but she's no longer with you. And so days like this can be a little harder. I understand. I don't to the extent I haven't lost my mother, but I know it can be a hard day. Some of you may have not even had a mother that showed what it was like to be a mother. may have not showed much care or encouragement or loved you. So I understand it's a mixed bag and that you're going through different things this morning. But according to Proverbs 31 here, I want to be a blessing to all and look to help all this morning. Reflection here of what a godly mother looks like. This is what we refer to as a Proverbs 31 woman here. And the text starts out in verse 10, says, "Who can find a virtuous woman? For her price is far above rubies. The heart of her husband doth safely trust in her, so that he shall have no need of spoil. She will do him good and not evil all the days of her life. She seeketh wool and flax, and worketh willingly with her hands. She is like the merchant ships. She bringeth forth her food from afar. She rises also while it is yet night, and giveth meat to her household, and a portion of her maidens. She considereth a field, and buyeth it. With the fruit of her hand she planteth a vineyard. She girdeth her loins with strength, and strengtheneth her arms. She perceiveth that her merchandise is good. Her candle goeth not out by the night. She layeth her hands to the spindle, and her hands hold the distaff. She stretcheth out her hand to the poor. Yea, she reacheth forth her hands to the needy. She's not afraid of the snow for her household. For all her household are clothed with scarlet. She maketh herself covering of tapestries. Her clothing is silk and purple. Her husband is known in the gates when he sitteth among the elders of the land. She maketh fine linen and selleth it, and liveth girdles of the merchants. Strength and honor are her clothing, and she shall rejoice in time to come. She openeth her mouth with wisdom, and in her tongue is the law of kindness. She looketh well to the ways of her household, and eateth not the bread of idleness. Her children rise up and call her blessed. Her husband also, and he praiseth her. Many daughters have done virtuously, but thou excellest them all. Favor is deceitful, and beauty is vain, but a woman that feareth the Lord, she shall be praised. Give her of the fruit of her hands. Let her own works praise her in the gates. I want to bring a message that I've just basically entitled Proverbs 31 Woman. Let's pray though. Dear Father, I thank you for this morning. I thank you again for all of our godly mothers. God, I thank you for the mothers here that made the choice to be, of all places, at church this morning. God, I thank you again for the opportunity to preach this morning and encourage both our women and men in our churches. Help our churches today, God. We need to see the value again of mothers and women and put them in the right context. Our world has everything backwards, but God, help us to not be like the world, but be as you desire us to be. Go before me today as I look to preach your word and present it as you would desire. In Jesus' name, amen. Got a little flavored water here. I'll try to work with that a little bit. But they say King Solomon wrote most, if not all, of the Proverbs here and wrote down these things under the inspiration of God's holy word. But as you come up to chapter 31, you'll notice that it has a different author. Someone writing, the mother of King Lemuel here, lays out some things through the first 9 verses that are good. I say this is to the men, and then the rest is to the women here, as it speaks here, how to be a godly mother. But they say, as you come to verse 10 on down, that this was actually a Hebrew acrostic. We can't see that in our English translation, and I don't know, do we have any Hebrew scholars here this morning that could tell us how this outlines? But just in case you don't know what an acrostic is, they actually have an acrostic for mothers. They say the M part of the acrostic of a mother is for the million things she gave me. O means that she's growing old. T is for the tears were shed to save me. H part of it is for her heart of purest gold. E is for eyes with love lighting and shining. R means right, and right's always been right. And then you put that all together and that spells out mother. Well, they say this is written out with an acrostic here, this passage here, and it gives us some descriptions for King Lemuel, which I believe personally, and it doesn't matter, it doesn't make for hill of beans, but personally I believe this was King Solomon, just a pen name for him, and I believe this was his mother writing, but it could have been other people that wrote this. But understand this is the inspiration of God's holy word. It gives us some things here to encourage us and help us out. That's what I want to do this morning. just bring 3 points here this morning to us to help and encourage and see what this woman was and how that we can better honor our women and love the mothers that were given. Number one, I see in this woman that she is a hard worker. I mean, I read through some of this passage and I get about just wore out, Brother Al, from just reading it. I mean, it's like, I feel like I want to sit down and go to sleep. How about you, Brother Mike? When we read through this passage, it's just like, man, she was a hard worker. I mean, you look at verses 13. She seeketh wool and flax, and work willingly with her hands. She's like the merchant ship. She bringeth forth her food from afar. She rises also while it is yet night, and giveth meat to her household, and a portion to her maidens. What I see here is this woman was a perpetual worker. Can anybody relate here this morning and see that this woman, verse 27, the end of it, it says, and eateth not the bread of idleness. Now, I'm no professional, I'll admit it. I'm not a professional husband, father, or any of that sort. But after being married almost 9 years, it'll be 9 years in June 6th, okay, I remember it by D-Day. I know that's not an eternity, but I have learned some women in my life are workers. I've got a mother, as many of y'all may know, had to raise 3 boys by herself as a single mother that was a nurse and would have to be the main provider and worker. And thankfully my grandparents helped out in raising us and partaking. I thank God for that. I believe it's been a help to me, and I've been able to get to know my grandparents as well. But she would work and work and work. And I've got a wife that's a worker. I tell you what, I know in our church there's women, you are workers. And I thank God for women that are workers. You know, there's some women, I mean, there's been times, my wife, we're working on a church project, it's like 10 o'clock, I'm like, listen honey, I love you and all, but I gotta go to bed, I gotta get up early in the morning. And so, I'm a grandpa by heart. I'm an old soul, I'll admit it. Come 10, 11 o'clock, I'm just like, I'm done for, okay? I'll probably be more grouchy than help. Anyways, so I go to bed, say at 10 o'clock. I got to get up earlier in the morning. It's not too bad these days. But, later on, as many of y'all know, I go to sleep and I'm just, lights are out, okay? I'm done for, okay? And the next morning, it's regularly, when she's on a project and everything, I'm like, honey, how late did you stay up? I know about the answer. Anywhere from like 12 to 3 o'clock in the morning. Just working. Some of you women are the same way. You get done with work, you work an 8-hour shift, you come home, you have to clean up the entire house, you have to put away the dishes, you have to put everything. And I've even found this. It doesn't matter. You could be in the bed even. You're supposed to be sound asleep, but your wheels are turning. Aren't they? Some of you women, you're thinking the previous day before, did I get the whole checklist done? Yeah. Am I off base here? Yeah. Am I preaching truth? You're going through the checklist, and then you're planning the next day how to fix the things that you left off. Yep. 2 and 3 in the morning, you're supposed to be sleeping. That's the way this woman was, man. She, all the time, was working. And I've learned with my wife, okay? Y'all may know she's full throttle anyways. I've learned she doesn't even eat coffee. Okay? Some of y'all like coffee. I drink a cup of Joe every now and again. I need it to get my wheels turning, but she doesn't even need it. I found that the hard way. Because my brother, he's an avid coffee drinker, okay? I've told him sometimes he needs to take the coffee maker and just lay it down on the altar, right? Because he loves it. But he would drink even the hard stuff with coffee, understand? Coffee I'm talking about here. He would drink the espresso, okay? You ever had a shot of espresso? You'll know it, okay? And he would make it strong espresso. Well, he decided, and my wife did, to drink it at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. Now, afternoon's not bad, right? You still got a 6 or 7 hour stretch. But she drank that, and I'm going to tell you, I'm in the bed fast asleep, like 10 o'clock or so. And I'm just like, she's been Energizer Bunny up to 10 o'clock. You know the Energizer Bunny with the, she's just wide open. She has to go to Walmart in the middle of night because she's just so active, if you will. She's juiced up on that espresso. 3 o'clock, 3 or 4 in the morning, she finally comes back and settles down. She's just geared that way. And so many of you women are. You're all the time wide open, and you're hard workers. I want to say I appreciate that. I may not even understand all that because, I try to be a hard worker, be hard at it, but once I'm done, Brother Mark, I'm about ready to sit down. Yep. Whereas sometimes the women, you mothers, you don't always get that option, if you will. I mean, this woman, what I see is a perpetual worker. And I'm not saying this morning that you just need to be all the time wide open. I'm saying sometimes we do need to relax. And I understand some of you get your relaxation out of working. Some of you, to go out in your yard and work, that's just like therapy. I understand. And every now and again, you need that therapy, okay? Mothers, you need to just take it easy sometimes. Let the husband do some things. I was even thinking about this, and I know this is off topic, and maybe I'm off on some of this, but, Brother Jimmy that was preaching for us Wednesday night brought up the story of Mary and Martha, and how that Martha was cumbered about and working, and Mary, and we trash Martha a lot of times, don't we? We say, but Jesus didn't say you're doing something bad. What did he say? Mary, you're doing the better part. You're working, Martha. It's just that Mary is doing the better part. But I wondered in my mind, now this has just recently popped in my head and you think I'm weird, that's okay. I do wonder in that passage though, where was the man? I know Jesus was there, but where was the man to help in any of that? I just praise and thank God for some working women. She was a perpetual worker. It even goes on to say she wanted to help with the poor. She had a heart for the poor. Verse 20 says this, she stretcheth out her hand to the poor. Yea, she reacheth forth her hands to the needy. She was a server, a giving heart. She had this hospitality about her, and I'm glad for a church we have that same heart to want to help the poor if we can. That's why we've developed a hospitality committee. And that's why we look to build one day a food pantry and to help and do all these things as we can. I know we have to be smart and wise with what God has given us, but I'm glad for some ladies, especially in our church, that you have that servant's heart to help with the poor. I see also in her work that she was prepared with her work. Look at verse 21. She's not afraid of the snow for her household, for all her household are clothed with scarlet. She maketh herself covers of tapestry. Her clothing is silk and purple. Her husband is known in the gates, and when he sitteth among the elders of the land, she maketh fine linen and selleth it, and delivereth girdles of the merchants. And she is prepared in her work. When the snow comes, she's ready because she's clothed her family. She doesn't scare for those things. She isn't worried about those things. As verse 21 tells us, she's not afraid of the snow because her household is clothed. She's prepared her family, especially with clothing. We have some women that work in our lives, men, and thank God for that. And thank you, mothers that work. And I know you probably heard on the news some of these teachers are having strikes going on, especially in Guilford County and Nashboro now. These teachers are saying we're not getting paid enough, so we're not coming to work. I believe it's this Wednesday. So many of them they don't even have enough teachers, so they're having to shut down the schools even in some of these areas. And I'm not supporting that. I'm not promoting that when I make this comment, but I'm glad our women don't go on strike and say we don't get paid enough. Because I understand that our teachers are underpaid. But I looked at, I think they do it every year. They look at a mother's salary. Did you know they do that? And you know what they say? A mother, if you will, is worth what she should earn as a salary every year now. They said for just if you will, not just, but for a stay-at-home mother, $134,000 and some change. That's what she would get in a salary if she was paid. They broke down even some of the hours. They said housekeeping is around 22 hours a week, earning about approximately $10,000 a year. For daycare center teacher is at $15 an hour, or 15 hours a week, earning about $10,817. A cook works about 13 hours on that and would earn very close to the $10,000. Computer operator, laundry machine operator, janitor, facility manager, van driver, CEO, and I like this one, psychiatrist.
Yep.
Total hours in a week, about 91 hours a week. And some overtime, obviously we can see there. Earning a total of around $134,121 a year. And you may have even seen some areas, as I mentioned there, where they said, hey, you left this out. And some of you others are maybe like, you left this area, I'll preach for that area, this area. You might even look at that. But I understand here, we have some hard-working women. And I appreciate that. I appreciate some godly women that are willing to work. And some men too that are willing to be workers. I'm glad for our servants' heart in this church. I'm glad for your work ethic. You have today, unfortunately, so many people that don't have that same work ethic. I see it time and time again. But along with being a hard worker, what I see with this woman as well, she is fittingly humorous. Notice with me verse 25. Strength and honor are her clothing, and she shall rejoice in time to come. Now the idea of rejoice is basically to laugh or to mock. When you find it in this passage, her humor is well fit. Starts off, strength and honor are her clothing. Verse 26 says she opened her mouth with wisdom, and in her tongue is the law of kindness. She has a humor that is just timely. In our world, unfortunately, humor has gone to where it's vulgar and whatnot. And I just don't find that funny. We each need to understand, I believe this, okay? I believe God has a sense of humor. How many of y'all really believe that? God, I believe He does. He made me after all. He's got to have a sense of humor. Really, He does. And with that, He's put that in us. Sometimes it's finding that balance with it to use it. So really, we need that humor. We need that time out of humor every now and again. Sometimes we just take ourselves too seriously. This woman had a humor that was fitting. Sometimes we just need a good laugh. We need some good humor in our lives. It says, because laughter and humor shows happiness. So it says in Proverbs 15, verse 13, a merry heart maketh a cheerful countenance. By sorrow of the heart, the spirit is broken. A few verses down on verse 15, it says, all the days of the afflicted are evil, but he that is of a merry heart hath a continual feast. Proverbs 17, verse 22 says this, a merry heart doeth good like a medicine, but a broken spirit drieth the bones. Even the experts have diagnosed and they've seen some health benefits to laughter and humor in our lives. They say there's some short-term benefits like this. It stimulates some of your organs, many organs. Laughter enhances your intake of oxygen and air. And they're still doing some further studies on these things. They said it activates and relieves your stress response. It helps with stress. It soothes tensions. It even has some long-term things that it can do. It improves your immune system. It can relieve pain. It increases personal satisfaction. And it improves your mood. Sometimes we just need some good old laughter. Some humor. I'm glad here in this church we can have some fun and cut up. But there's that balance of not cutting each other down either. And that's what we see on the TV sometimes with these comedians. Don't they do that? They just cut people down where they're nothing. Everybody's laughing in the crowd. But to be honest, I don't find that funny. They even have some of these videos of people, landing, trying to ride a bike and do this super cool trick and getting hurt. I don't even find that as much humorous because people are getting hurt. Yeah. And we're laughing at somebody else's afflictions. But using humor and using it in the right context, that's what I see with this woman, that she had strength and honor are her clothing, and she shall rejoice, she shall laugh in time to come. She's going to rejoice and she's going to laugh in the right timing. I see the number one, she was a hard worker. I see number two, that she had humor, well-fit humor. But I see also in this context, she was honorable. She was honorable. It says in verse 10, who can find a virtuous woman, for her price is far above rubies. We talked about how the basic salary, if you will, of a mother was, but let's just be honest, man. Let's understand today, our mothers, our wives are invaluable. We can't put a price tag. We can't put a salary. We can't put those things on our mothers and our wives, can we? They are precious. And when we have a virtuous, we have a godly woman in our lives especially, her price is far above rubies. She's honorable in purity. She's honored in this context by her husband. Verse 11 says, the heart of her husband does safely trust in her, so that she shall have no need of spoil. She will do him good and not evil all the days of her life. What we see is she was honorable because she was godly, and that she knew her husband trusted in her. And husbands, when we have a godly woman that we can trust, that's such a blessing. And I know so many of you men, you have that in a wife. You have a woman you can trust, and thank God for that. She has fulfilled her responsibilities, and she's reaped the rewards of those by being honored by her husband. She's honored by her whole household. Verse 27, she looketh well the ways of her household, and eateth not the bread of her idleness. Her children rise up and call her blessed. Her husband also, and he praiseth her. Many daughters have done virtuously, but thou excellest them all. This woman was honorable to all these people due to her strong character. She had a strong character. She fulfilled her responsibility as both a mother and a wife in her household. And she was reaping the rewards of those. But you know, along with that responsibility she fulfilled, what we see on the flip side is that her husband and that her children fulfilled their responsibility in honoring their mother. She was fulfilling her choice, but then on the flip side, we have, as a father, as a husband, and as a son, I have the responsibility then to honor my own mother, to love then and honor my wife. It says in Exodus 20 verse 12, honor thy father and thy mother, that thy days may be long upon the land which the Lord thy God giveth thee. You see, we're as men, and any children really, we're always to honor our mother and father. Always to honor. But there comes a time when that obey commandment is not there. Always honor. But when we're out of the household, when we become an adult, the obey command then ceases for us. But understand, honoring should always be there. I know for some of you, unfortunately, your mother has gone to be with the Lord. But I can tell you this, you can honor her right now on how you live and your testimony. And you show right now how much you cared for that one that has gone on to be. And husbands, you know, we forget this too. We're to honor our wife as well. We say, preacher, the Bible just says to love our wife. That's all, right? Check that off the list. Well, 1 Peter 3:7 says this, likewise, ye husbands, dwell with them according to knowledge, giving, next word, honor unto the wife. And what I see in Proverbs 31, a woman that had the right character, that had a strong character and lived that. And that she was fulfilling her responsibility. And in turn, the husband and the children were fulfilling their responsibility in honoring their mother. And that's what it comes down to, fulfilling those roles. It goes on to also say she was honored by God and by others. Verse 30, favor is deceitful and beauty is vain, but a woman that feareth the Lord shall be praised. Give her the fruit of her hands, and let her own works praise her in the gates. People noticed around this woman's testimony, noticed what she was like. And as you may have noticed through this sermon, mothers, you may have noticed I didn't preach a sermon at you. And I haven't preached down to you. And I hope as we roll around to Father's Day, I do the same thing, that I encourage and love you. Maybe you found in this sermon, you know, preachers, I've looked through this, I've seen as a person, man or woman, maybe I'm not as hardworking. Maybe I have some time of idleness. That's between you and the Lord. I want to tell you, God, where you have your shortcomings, He can make them strengths. And He can instill in you a better work ethic as you follow Him. Maybe you find in some ways, man, my humor's off every now and again. Same thing. God can work on those. God can help us. Because we need humor. We need some, that's why they call it comic relief, right? Sometimes we just need that. We do. There's nothing wrong with it, nothing sinful. And we also see a woman of honor. Maybe sometimes you don't feel as honorable, lack your purity throughout your life. But here's the good thing about our God in Christ. This is what I love about him. He's faithful and just to forgive us our sins and to cleanse us from all unrighteousness. So this is the good thing. You can take it to him. Any of these areas that you may be lacking, he can help. Because I'm wanting to see in our churches, in our families all across America, this type of tone, this type of family. A Proverbs 31 family, if you will. Our families. What is wrong with America today? Well, it's the president, it's the vice president, this type of things we may hear on the news. Especially fake news, right? But what is really wrong with our country is our households. It's really at the core where the disruption has been. The households have gotten out of order because we're not following God's word, God's design. And then people cry out, why is God making all this mess? No, God didn't make this mess. We did. But I tell you what, God's so good, he'll help us pick it back up if we'll come back to him. That's a good thing about our God. If you will, stand to your feet. Miss Mary, if you'll please come play hymn of invitation. Like I said, I want to be more of an encouragement than discouragement with this sermon. But if God's done something in your heart, in your life, and you feel like this altar's the place you need to come, you come. I'll tell you this, if you never called on Jesus to save you, today would be a great day of salvation, that you can know you're on your way to heaven. So you see me if you have any questions about that.